Guys, it is Rinne-Hatake here, back with another video, and today I got what if Bardock, yes, what if Bardock destroyed planet Vegeta? And this story was suggested by Hodge Music, and you should go check him out. And big ups to him for suggesting this, because I thought this was a pretty good idea. And he did write me a story to go with this suggestion as well, and it's a pretty good story idea, but I decided to change it up a little bit. So yeah, hopefully you guys do enjoy, and make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and without further ado, cue the intro. The story would begin around 3 weeks before Frieza was initially told by Beerus to destroy planet Vegeta. Bardock at this moment in time was busy with his squad. They'd been destroying the planet's inhabitants and major cities by the orders of Frieza. On this particular day, however, Beerus was supposed to go to this planet and judge the food, and if it wasn't up to his standards, he would erase it from existence. While Bardock and the other Saiyans were busy tearing up the place, Beerus, the destroyer, would arrive. But unbeknownst to him and his attendant Whis, the place had already been reduced to rubble. Beerus would grow rather angry, seeing as his plan to eat this planet's delicious delicacies had been ruined by these ingrate monkeys. As Beerus would remember the time he had to put King Vegeta in his place for, well, having gotten him the second best pillow and not the best. The destroyer would see the capital city turn into rubble by these savages, and his patience had just run out. "You foolish mortals," Beerus would exclaim with a menacing glare. The Saiyans would halt their fun and turn to face what looked to be a purple cat and a strangely dressed tall blue man. Little did the Saiyans know that they were currently in the presence of the god of destruction. The Saiyans closest to Beerus would start to mock Beerus, making claims that a house cat was on the loose and that his owner needs to put a tighter leash on it. Whis would put his hand over his mouth to stop himself from bursting out into laughter. "Arrogant fools! You have angered me beyond reconciliation, and now I shall erase you from existence," Beerus would shout with anger as veins began to bulge from his forehead. An ominous purple aura began to flare up around Beerus. The Saiyans would feel the planet shake, so with a bit of shock and fear, they quickly start using their scouters. They scanned Beerus, checking his power level, but it couldn't read anything at all. "How could this be? The scouter isn't picking up anything about his power level, so how is this cat doing this?" The Saiyans would ask, in utter fear and shock. But before they can utter another word, Bardock's men would have started to vanish, and the only thing they could remember hearing before their sudden demise was "Hakai," Beerus would say in an angry tone. Bardock would see all of his men perish before his eyes, and he couldn't do anything about it. Tears of pain, sorrow, and fear would start to flow from Bardock's eyes. "How?" he asked in total disbelief. Bardock would feel a sudden rage erupt from within as he yells at Beerus, declaring he'll avenge his men if it's the last thing he'd do. But unbeknownst to him, it actually might be the last thing he'll ever do. A golden aura engulfs Bardock as his hair would rise and turn a golden blonde. Bardock would enter Super Saiyan. After that golden light dissipates, Bardock would try to rush at Beerus with a loud battle cry. And Beerus... Excuse me. But we continue. Beerus, my apologies. But anyways, we continue. Beerus, would see Bardock's insane strength. Well, insane for Saiyans, of course. But it doesn't really matter. He would put him down in a matter of seconds, and Bardock would lay there, battered and bruised. As he would slowly raise his head, and the looming shadow of Beerus was there to greet him. Beerus would begin speaking, saying, "Saiyan, you seem to be the strongest one of the bunch, and I'll make an exception for you, seeing as you are probably the strongest Saiyan I've ever met. I'll make a deal with you. If you want to survive, of course." "Deal? What kind of deal?" Bardock would ask, nervously. "Well, if you must know the deal, it is for you to destroy your own planet. And if this task is complete, I'll allow you to train on my planet. And if that isn't enough, I'll allow you to make a wish using the Namekian Dragon Balls." Beerus would reply. Bardock would contemplate this and would ultimately decide no. He can say, or before he can say this to Beerus, however, a few words were uttered from Beerus, and this changed Bardock's whole answer immediately. "I'll do it," he'd say with a solemn look. A massive smile would appear on the destroyer's face. Beerus would walk back to Whis and signal for him to get ready to leave. Bardock would look at both of them as a blue light engulfs them, as they shoot out into space and leave, heading back to their own world. Bardock would close his eyes, remembering what had been said. Flashback. "If this isn't done by 2 weeks, say goodbye to your wife and kids." As Bardock would have a shocked look on his face, as this is what changed his answer so quickly. Flashback end. Bardock would start thinking of ways to get out of the situation, but he thought of doing, everything he thought of doing, someone precious to him would end up dying. In the end, Bardock would just accept it and just limp over to his space pod and enter, as he would set coordinates for his home planet. The space pod would begin to fly off into space, as he would close his eyes once more to get some much-needed rest. A week rolled by, as Bardock would have just arrived. The Saiyans who saw Bardock's ship land would immediately rush over. They'd open the ship and find him battered and bruised. They would quickly rush him over, or he'd be quickly rushed to the medical room, placing him in the healing pod so his body can fully recover from all the damage he's taken. 3 more days would go by as, Guinea's worry grew by the second. But Bardock would have awakened, and the first thing he would ask is, how long has it been? And that, once he'd figured that out, he'd turn paler than a ghost. It had almost been 2 weeks, and he was running out of time. So in an instant, he'd leave the pod, or the healing pod, and rush over to his house. And Guinea was preparing a meal for herself and Raditz, who had just returned from a mission. Bardock would burst through the door, seeing his whole family there. Guinea would stop what she was doing and rush forward to give him a hug and kiss him on the cheek. Guinea would cry on his shoulder, and he'd ignore her cries and worried comments and just embrace her. They'd stay like that for a few more moments, and then Bardock would move her away. Guinea would be shocked by this action and ask him what was wrong. Bardock would remain silent for a few more moments, and then start speaking. "I have to destroy the planet." Guinea would look at him puzzled, as if Bardock was making some kind of joke. But he was serious. Bardock would explain the situation, and at first, they didn't believe him. But with some convincing, he managed to persuade them. But even so, they still didn't want to leave, seeing as this is their home planet. Or this is their home. But Bardock would reassure them, telling them it's all going to be okay. But in the back of his mind, he was sick to his stomach. They'd pack a bag with some essentials and head off out into space, seeing as a ship really won't be necessary. So they'd head off. Of course, they'd be bringing baby Kakarot. However, Raditz would slip off somewhere to meet with Nappa, as Vegeta, side note, Vegeta would not be on planet Vegeta at this current moment. He was currently with Frieza out on a mission, and he won't be returning back for a little while. But anyways, we continue. Bardock wouldn't really notice his son go missing as he was so concentrated, and adrenaline was pumping throughout his body like crazy. Bardock, Rinne, and Kakarot would be out in space, not really deep space because Kakarot won't be able to breathe. But Whis would already be there, and he'd set up a little barrier for Rinne to be in because, well, she has a baby in her hands. But anyways, yeah. But Whis would already be there, but Lord Beerus wasn't, seeing as he is currently sleeping. So yeah, Bardock wouldn't ask too much questions as he powered up to Super Saiyan and created a Ki Blast. He fired it at his own planet with tears in his eyes. And the blast was actually just strong enough to destroy planet Vegeta, as at this time Bardock's power level, seeing as he would be around the power level of 10,000 in his base with a 50 times multiplier, he'd just be strong enough to destroy this planet. Or he'd be strong enough to destroy the planet. But anyways, we continue. Bardock would drop out of Super Saiyan and turn to face his family, and he'd only be greeted to his wife and youngest son. Bardock, seeing this, would grow deathly pale. No, this can't be! He'd shout in anger and frustration. Rinne would also realize what Bardock was talking about. Raditz. He'd gone missing, and the only place that he could have possibly been was on planet Vegeta, and it's currently destroyed, meaning Bardock had just killed his own son. Bardock would be in utter shock as Rinne would cry tears of pain and sadness. Whis would look at them and sigh, as he himself would have to go over to them and hold on to their shoulders as he began to head over to Beerus' planet, as a blue light engulfs them, sending them to Beerus' planet, as it would take a while. But we move. A week would roll by, and Bardock is still in a state of shock. This was the worst pain he'd ever been dealt, even worse than whatever Beerus could ever hope to give. Rinne would be in a similar state, but the only thing giving her hope left was Kakarot. The innocent smile that he'd give to his mother always cured her from her saddened state. Bardock, however, would snap out of his depression, realizing he still has two people left, and those two people were his everything. They were the light that shined even in the midst of the darkest of nights. Bardock made an oath to himself then and there that he'd grow to be the strongest, so he can protect his loved ones. With that vow, that oath, Bardock went to work, asking Whis for the hardest training and that he could possibly give, and Whis delivered. This training was so grueling and tasking that it was like a near-death experience for Bardock every time he did it. 2 months would go by and Bardock would be stronger than he'd ever been. Every time, since it's a kind of like a near-death experience, since this training is so bad, Bardock would get Zenkai boost from this. But even so, before he felt that this training, even though it's this good, it's made him so much stronger than he ever was before, he felt as if that he could never reach Beerus' level at this pace. So, he decided to use the Dragon Balls that he was, granted by Beerus himself, the 3 wishes. These are the Namekian Dragon Balls, by the way, not the Super Dragon Balls. And I decided to change this, this is a side note right now. I decided to change it because the Super Dragon Balls are kind of busted, and they're practically on the level of Zeno, technically, not probably in his destructive capability, seeing as he can undo the destruction that Zeno has caused. So yeah, I think giving him that would be too busted, so I decided to lower it down to the Namekian Dragon Balls. But anyways, we continue. The first wish that Bardock asked for was to be able to learn things at a faster pace, and this would come in very handy. His second wish was unlimited stamina. Third wish was to be able to have infinite ki. Now, these 3 wishes made him absolutely busted. So yeah, those are what Bardock wished for, and they came in incredibly handy as Bardock absorbed everything Whis could or would teach him like a sponge. and the rate of Bardock's growth was insane. After 3 months, he'd managed to access God Ki, and the following months after that, he managed to master it completely. Whis was absolutely bewildered at his rate of growth, and his rate of growth, his strength and skills, and we time skipped 6 years. Bardock at this point would have trained a lot in 6 years, non-stop. Gine would have noticed Bardock getting stronger as well, and she would decide to access or learn how to access God, the Super Saiyan God herself, just in case. And this would take her 2 years to learn. So yeah, and Kakarot would have also started training at the point of 6 years or 6 years of age. He would have also started his training, and Whis as and under Whis as well. And the progress of Kakarot's progress would be at a steady pace. But anyways, Whis would teach Kakarot the basics of the universe and train him physically as well. But yeah, we continue. During those 6 years, Bardock has surpassed his limits and was able to go into Super Saiyan Blue and master it. Not only that, but he has access to Mastered Ultra Instinct. Bardock at this point would probably be the most busted character in the Dragon Ball universe, because currently his abilities that he's wished for made him the strongest mortal in Universe 7. But we move. He'd ask Whis, but we move. He'd ask Whis if there was anything else he can teach him, and Whis would ponder this for a few moments, and he'd reply, maybe you can learn a technique that the people of Yardrat call instant transmission. It'll be more useful than you just trying to speed blitz them, seeing as they won't be able to sense you anyways. And I believe there's another ability called Force Spirit Vision. This might come in handy sometime later, as Bardock would find these techniques interesting and decide to learn them. And he learned them indeed, only needing 3 weeks to do so, and that is record time. But anyways, after he'd returned, Beerus had finally awoken from his nap. After he'd walk out to see Bardock standing there with his wife and children next to Whis, Beerus grumbled to Whis, asking if the training went as planned, and Whis would nod. Whis would nod. So, Saiyan, we meet again, Beerus would say with a tired expression. Bardock replied with a cocky smirk, indeed we do. And it's time to pay with your blood. As well, he'd rush at Beerus. Beerus wasn't expecting it, so he took the sucker punch straight to the face, as he was sent back. As Beerus would look at him with a menacing glare, as he'd say, "You've angered me yet again, and this time there is no mercy." As Beerus would wipe the blood from his mouth and rush straight at Bardock, which would take Gine and Whis, who is there, would take Gine and Kakarot to a safe enough distance and watch. Beerus would start to gain the upper hand on Bardock as he began to mock him, asking if this was the best he can offer. Bardock smiled as a fiery red aura engulfed him, as he managed to transformed into Super Saiyan God. The fight was incredible, and Beerus began to enjoy it himself. As Bardock and Beerus were going blow for blow, the universe could feel the power that these two have, and it was immense. But Beerus would turn up the heat, as he'd access full power, and Bardock got blown away. He wasn't expecting such strength, and Bardock began to get absolutely destroyed. He's getting folded like an omelet at this point, as he gets sent to the ground. As Beerus would look down in disappointment and prepare to kill Bardock as he prepare a Hakai. But before he could finish doing so, Bardock would realize the threat is very, very much inevitable. He'd realize that Beerus is very, very much a threat, and he'd decide to stop playing around, as he'd access his full power, going into Mastered Ultra Instinct and skipping Super Saiyan Blue. As from there, it turned very bad for Beerus, as Bardock was already behind Beerus before he could see it, as 1,000 punches could be felt by Beerus, as that speed that Bardock displayed couldn't even be seen by Beerus, as Beerus was sent back. As their fight continued, it showed that Beerus did not stand a chance. Bardock was using everything he'd learned from Whis and from Whis and the abilities that that he learned from Yardrat to good use, as he'd ultimately decided Beerus' fate. And with one fast motion, he was behind Beerus, and his arm was through his chest as Beerus would cough out a ton of blood as he'd look back at Whis and say to him, "So, this is how it ends, Whis." "I'm afraid it must be so, Lord Beerus," as Whis would reply, and Beerus would lose his life, and the God of Destruction was gone. But there was already a candidate, seeing as Whis realized that, well, before all this happened, Whis realized that Beerus was kind of losing his edge, and Beerus isn't taking his role as God of Destruction seriously, so Whis decided to take it into his own hands and find a suitable candidate. And this is when he found Bardock, and Bardock had become the candidate, as Bardock, became the candidate for God of Destruction. As Beerus would fall, his God of Destruction outfit would vanish, as Bardock's Saiyan armor would also vanish itself. And it was replaced by the God of Destruction outfit. And Whis would name Bardock the new God of Destruction, and he'd basically deal with the higher-ups and all that, the Angel Grand Priest, and he'd inform Zeno himself about this whole change and all that. So yeah, that was changed, and Bardock was named the new God of Destruction. Events afterward were pretty simple, as Bardock would handle Frieza, King Cold, and Majin Buu, and ultimately be dealt with. Ultimately, all of them would be dealt with, and I do apologize if you heard a lot of background noises. I do apologize. But anyways, we continue. As they would all be dealt with, as the Supreme Kai would ask for help with Majin Buu, and help was granted. And Universe 7's mortality rate began to rise as Bardock would deal with all the unnecessary problems, as he himself felt pain and suffering. And he decided that since he was granted this role, he would make sure the pain and suffering of all the others was not there. He'd be the one to carry all of it himself. As this is where I'm going to leave it off. If you guys would like a bonus part to this one-shot series, then comment if you'd like one. But anyways, with all that being said, peace.